Come with me, won't you? We're on our way to Mainz, Germany, 1450. Step out onto the cobblestones, and the first thing that hits you isn't the smell, though God help us all, the smell. No, it's the noise. There's dogs barking, there's roosters crowing, there's dairy cattle mooing, there's people harnessing their horses, the sounds of cooking, the sounds of bartering. But cutting through it all are the church bells. And in 1450, church bells aren't theatrical background noise. They are the clock, the calendar, the community announcement system. They tell you when to wake up, they tell you when to pray, when to work, and when to stop. Your whole body responds to them automatically because they have structured every hour of every day of your entire life. And by the way, medieval pigs, they're just roaming about freely because they are the garbage disposal system. And let me tell you, medieval pigs smell like hell. Somewhere in this noisy, pig-infested, bell-obsessed city is a man named Johannes Gutenberg, a goldsmith by trade. He is about to accidentally change the world. Welcome to the show. My name is MaryAnna, and this is Say It to My Face, a podcast about our internet, our egos, and the idea that our modern problems are somehow different from ancient problems. But they aren't. And Mainz, Germany in 1450 is about to prove it. Now, just a note, this is a podcast that utilizes history to make points, and it is scripted. So you may occasionally hear the sound of paper turning because I would rather get the facts right than to accidentally turn a Roman soldier into a Facebook moderator. History is messy enough without me messing it up further. My goal isn't to make ancient people sound modern. It's to understand why humans keep doing the same things over and over and over again, even when the technology delivery changes. We left episode 1 in Rome, talking about curse tablets, sacred wells, anonymous grievances scratched into lead and dropped into the dark waters, and the human urge to be an anonymous dickhead. Ancient tradition, I should say. But Rome is just the beginning of this story. Let's recap what we know real fast about those tablets. Archaeologists dug them from the dirt between 1978 and 1983. The curse throwers chose lead specifically because it endures. It endures the heat, the weather, and time. Literally 1,800 years later, and we can still read the grudges of the people that threw them in the well in the first place. I mean, they picked a good medium, didn't they, with lead? The tablets followed a basic structure. These were anonymous accusations to a divine audience with the gods as the algorithm. It was a detailed listing of the accused crimes and a demand for punishment. But there was zero opportunity for the other side of the story and certainly no appeals process. A curse tablet is nothing more than a viral call-out post, a subtweeted screenshot, a 7-part thread about someone's behavior. The lead tablet transmuted itself into a post on X. The well where you drop it is the algorithm, and every time, and I mean every time, humans get a new megaphone and a way to stay anonymous, we use it the exact same way. But let's keep traveling forward. We're staying in this stone building in Mainz. It belonged to one of Gutenberg's distant relatives, and it's called the Humprenhof. And you'll hear the miracle of the printing press before you see it. The rhythmic thump and creak of a modified wine press being used to pull humans kicking and screaming into the future through the miracle of print. Inside this building, it smells like hot metal, oil, and secrets. Gutenberg is in the corner, probably sweating, definitely paranoid, working behind locked doors because he knows what he has and he is terrified someone will take it. And they did. His financial backer, Johann First, eventually sued him and walked away with the press, the equipment, and the whole operation. Poor Gutenberg was paranoid and still got robbed. Some things never change. But here's what happened first. Gutenberg wanted to print Bibles. That was like his whole plan. He wanted holy books printed faster and cheaper for the glory of God. Beautiful intention, right? And he meant it. Gutenberg was a devout Catholic. This wasn't a business plan first. It was a calling. He genuinely believed he was doing God's work. The irony being that the press he built to spread the word of God ended up spreading the word of everyone, including the people actively trying to burn the church down. And for a while, his printing press worked exactly as intended. Printers churned out Bibles, legal documents, religious text, calendars, classical works. Literacy traveled and the knowledge moved along with it. Communities that had never had access to the written word suddenly did. And for a few glorious decades, everything seemed to be working exactly as intended. Which, of course, if we know anything about human nature, should have been the first warning sign. Because someone eventually figured out, if you can print a Bible, you can print a complaint. Enter Martin Luther. Martin Luther was a German monk, a reformer, and a theologian. He was a man who believed the Catholic Church, which was the only church in Western Europe and the most powerful institution on earth at the time, had lost its way. Specifically, the church was selling forgiveness, literally. Like if you greased enough palms with silver and gold, your sins were forgiven and your time in purgatory was reduced. Now, if you couldn't afford to grease palms, well, enjoy hell, you heathen. Well, has the church changed much? Kidding, don't come for me. Martin Luther called this out for what it was. It was a shakedown by the church at the cost of your eternal soul. And he wrote about it and printed his complaints in painstaking detail. Then he nailed his pamphlet, which was 95 bullet points of contention, to a wooden church door in Germany in 1517. Martin Luther said he wanted to start a conversation. Dude, if this doesn't sound like the medieval version of rage bait, I don't know what does. Because Martin Luther didn't just get a conversation, he got an explosion. His ideas spread across Europe faster than anyone thought possible, because the printing press could reproduce the ideas by the thousands. Supporters printed them, critics printed rebuttals, local rulers picked sides, religious authorities picked sides, and definitely ordinary people picked sides. And once everyone had a printing press and an opinion, things got even uglier. The Protestant Reformation triggered decades of religious, political, and social upheaval. Pamphlets flew back and forth. Accusations escalated. Entire communities and families were fractured, and religious wars followed. Not because one monk nailed a document to a church door, but because a new technology suddenly allowed grievances, rumors, arguments, and ideology to spread further and faster than ever before. Sound familiar? Martin Luther's enemies printed pamphlets calling him a drunk and a fraud. His followers printed pamphlets calling the church corrupt. And nobody fact-checked any of it. I mean, let's get real, right? Nobody had to sign their name. You just printed it, you dropped it on the cobblestones, and you scurried away. And in return, Luther's Catholic enemies depicted him as a seven-headed monster. Let's put that into context. The last book of the Bible, Revelations, the Apocalypse book, describes the beast of the end times as a seven-headed monster. So calling Luther a seven-headed beast wasn't just throwing shade. They were calling him the Antichrist. A theological death sentence. And isn't that exactly what happens when someone goes viral for the wrong reasons today? They don't get accused of one thing. They get accused of everything simultaneously. You're racist, and you're sexist, and you're elitist, and a narcissist, and a fraud, and you're dangerous, and whatever else the mob decides to pile on at that moment. A pamphlet even called Luther the devil's fart. And I want to be clear, that's a direct translation. And in 1520, that was considered serious theological commentary. Martin Luther got the medieval version of digital stoning. Here's where I want to play devil's advocate, pun intended. Some of those people had a point. Many of the people writing curse tablets in ancient Rome were broke, lower class. This was often their only means of getting back at someone, whether it was justified or not justified, or whether it worked or didn't work. They couldn't afford lawyers. And as much as everybody on social media wants to scream they're calling their lawyers, they don't have one either. And what maps, and that maps to what many think social media has already done, which is given a voice to the overlooked, the overworked, the regular people who had no platform to speak on before. The ability to hold powerful people accountable in ways that simply did not exist before. And from time to time, that's true. Social media truly is a love-hate relationship, and it has done good, and it does do bad. The line between mob mentality and actual accountability has always been blurry. It's very easy to lie to yourself and pat yourself on the back, thinking that you're on the right side of history. But are you? All right, well, let's stay with the pamphlets, because they didn't stay theological for long. Pamphlets targeting individual women would accuse them of witchcraft, adultery, or any other social transgression. It was devastating to a reputation and impossible to fight. A named woman had no recourse. She had no appeal. She had no one to petition to help her save her reputation. And for many women in 16th century Europe, reputation wasn't social currency. It was survival. A printed accusation could damage marriage prospects, family standing, business relationships, and physical safety. A woman could not appear in court on her own behalf. She had to rely on a man to represent her, whether that be a husband, a father, or a brother. And if that father, husband, brother believed the accusation, she was cooked. And nobody back then was subtle either. The anonymity of print and toss gave people permission to say things they would never say to someone's face. Nice callback, right? It also reminds me of Lady Whistledown. The language was apocalyptic, sexual, scatological, that's poop, and personal. Specific priests were accused of specific affairs with specific women. No evidence required, just print it and distribute it. A different pamphlet accused a specific merchant in Nuremberg of cheating his customers, and the pamphlet named him. The pamphlet also described his physical appearance so that he could be identified on the street, and it called for God to strike him down. I'll take medieval doxing for 500, Alex. The targeted man had no recourse. Everyone in Nuremberg read it. Do you think no one believed at least parts of it? Where there's smoke, there's fire and all that? Except that saying has never actually been accurate. How many people have been wrongly convicted in the court of public opinion, or for that matter, in an actual court of law? And what happens to the people watching from the sidelines? The ones who see what happened to the merchant in Nuremberg and think, ah, shit, I'm never opening my mouth again. This actually has a name. This is called the chilling effect. The term wasn't coined until the 20th century as a legal and free speech terminology, but the phenomena? It's been alive since at least 1520, and I'm sure quite longer. The threat of punishment can be so pervasive that people self-censor and withdraw from public life entirely without ever having been targeted themselves. Every person who has ever deleted a comment because they feared backlash, every person who made their account private or deleted it altogether, every person who never started a channel because they watched what happened to someone else. I've gotten many DMs on both of my channels saying, I couldn't take the heat that you've taken in the past. But that woman in the medieval village, she was watching her neighbor get named in a pamphlet and doing the math on what that means for her own safety, and there was no chance she was going to speak out. So if every modern digital wallflower, she is every modern digital wallflower who has ever watched someone get skewered online and thought, well, why would I want any part of that? Visibility has always been dangerous, but in the 20th century, they actually gave it a name, the chilling effect. And here's where the printing press stops being a metaphor and starts being a murder weapon. Meet Etienne Doulé, French printer, scholar, translator, and general pain in the ass to anyone in power. He printed pamphlets exposing the immoralities of monks and priests and publicly called out the Catholic Church's attempts to shut down printing in France entirely. He made enemies the way most people make coffee, constantly and without apology. His competitors eventually framed him. They sent 2 large packages to Paris, marked with his name, that were heretic books, printed in Geneva, and he hadn't even published them. Those weren't his books, but he was arrested. He was arrested and he escaped and fled to Italy. And then he made the catastrophic mistake of returning to France too quickly and was immediately arrested again. On August 3rd, 1546, which was only his 37th birthday, Etienne Doulé was burned at the stake in Paris. He was compelled to carry a bundle of his own publications to the marketplace where he and his books were burned together. His crime? A few words in a translation of Plato that his enemies decided to read as proof that he was secretly denying the immortality of the soul. That's it. A translation choice, literally words on a page. He was burned at the stake. And because the printing press now existed, which before it didn't, so censorship was easy, right? Now that the printing press existed, all it required was killing the heretic and burning a handful of notebooks. But after the printing, I got that wrong. Let's do that again. And because the printing press now existed, before it, censorship was easy. So before the printing press, all it required was killing the heretic and burning a handful of notebooks. But after the printing press, it became nearly impossible to destroy all copies of a dangerous idea. And the more dangerous a book was claimed to be, the more people wanted to read it. Every time the church published a list of banned books, the booksellers knew exactly what to print next. The real modern equivalent is when a platform tries to remove something and it explodes instead. The Streisand effect, for example. Barbra Streisand tried to suppress aerial photos of her Malibu mansion in 2003. And the lawsuit caused millions of people to see photos that had previously been viewed exactly 6 times. The printing press didn't just democratize information, it democratized consequences. You could now be famous and dead for something you wrote, or something someone said you wrote. Doulé knew what was coming as they led him to the fire. His surname happened to be a form of the Latin verb meaning to hurt, and on the way to the stake, he reportedly made one final joke about it. Doulé himself does not suffer, but the pious crowd grieves. I almost read that in French, but I didn't want to destroy it. He went out with a punchline, which is honestly the most internet thing anyone has ever done. But let's get back to Johannes. Johannes Gutenberg wanted to print Bibles faster. He accidentally invented a way to spread misinformation, propaganda, and the equivalent of a medieval comment section, with zero oversight, zero moderation, and no one standing between the words and the crowd. 500 years later, we're still trying to figure out what to do with that. This show, podcast, whatever you'd like to call it, it exists because I think we need to have a conversation about what's actually happening. Like, not the version where it's all someone else's fault, not the version where everything is fine, and not the version where the solution is to log off forever, but the version where we look at the evidence across centuries and say, what do we actually want to do about this? And why do we act this way? Why are humans cruel? Next time, we're leaving the printing press behind and plugging directly into the modem. One more thing before I go. I'm not a historian. I am an info nerd with a microphone and a genuinely unhealthy amount of curiosity. I've done my research, but if I've gotten something wrong, misread a source, or taken something out of context, please bring it up and let's talk. I'll do an episode. We'll see how this goes, but I want to do an episode later where it says I got it wrong, and I give full credit to the people who corrected me, and we all collectively get smarter. So if this resonated with you, follow the show wherever you're listening. I know this sounds much different than my normal content, and I am getting my feet wet. This is a new manner of putting information out, and so I probably sound a little stilted. I'll get better at this for sure. And if you know someone who needs to hear this podcast, send it to them, because that's how shows like this find their people. Also, I am looking for guests. I would love to have some guests on, people who have crazy stories about internet viral hate campaigns, death threats, stalkers. I have a story of my own there. Lost businesses, lost marriages, lost friendships, lost jobs. If the internet has changed your life, I would love to have you as a guest. See the show notes for how to email to apply. I'm MaryAnna, and this is Say It to My Face podcast. See you online.